Hey everybody, this is Denny.
And this is James from TeaDB, and we are on episode number
18.
Yes, indeed. And what do we have today?
So we have some Oolong from Taiwan, Alishan Mountain. This is a high mountain Oolong. It's coming from floating leaves.
Yep.
It's lightly oxidized. It's light in body, and let's give it a try. So we have about a little over 5 grams of dry leaf here. We're just going to do our basic process of a quick rinse, and then we'll go ahead and start steeping from there.
Yep. And the Guy one, I think, is 100 milliliters, if I recall correctly. So a relatively small Guy one for this amount of tea.
Nice light color. Definitely is going to open up.
Yep.
As we brew this.
And so Alishan, compared with the other high mountain teas, is kind of like the budget. There's a lot of tea harvested at Alishan Mountain, so for a lot of people, it's the first sort of high mountain tea that we get to experience. And for me too, that was certainly the case, and I think Denny as well.
Yeah.
And we've both had a lot of experience drinking Alishan from a few different vendors. And I really enjoy the tea. And if you're looking for good bang for your buck as far as high mountain tea, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great starter tea for getting kind of lighter oxidized but higher mountain oolongs. Delicious. And if you go to some of the places that we'll recommend in the show, you'll find something really tasty.
Yep.
So we have kind of a little bit lower than traditional oolong temperature water, and I'm going to do about 30 seconds, which is pretty much coming up right about now. And these leaves have already opened up a fair amount. Compared to the rinse, we have a much deeper saturation of yellow.
Mm-hmm.
We can take a look, but I'm actually using a fair amount of leaf. I find that light teas like this tend to do quite well like that.
It does. I find that very good high mountain tea tends to be very, very forgiving. And you can check out like our Da Yuling from episode 13, I believe, and that one, I feel like we may have slightly overbrewed it in terms of temperature and time, but it still came out very, very nicely. I'd say this is very typical of kind of high mountain tea. It's
totally
kind of got that nice, creamy, savory
yeah,
feel.
kind of vegetal a little bit. You're not getting things like maybe passion fruits or exotic fruits that you might get in other lightly oxidized oolong teas.
Yeah.
So I'm getting more kind of vegetal, grassy but sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, nice.
Very well balanced.
Yeah, creamy definitely.
Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of research these days, looking a lot more into kind of the cultivars used for Taiwanese tea. Mm-hmm. And so this is actually the cultivar that's used for kind of the highest mountain. So they'll use the same cultivar. It's called Chin-hsin. I could easily be mispronouncing that, for Da Yuling, Lishan, higher mountains than the Alishan. So it's a good sign that they are using that cultivar. Generally lower areas in Alishan that may not have the best yield or might not have the best growing areas, they will use something like Jingchuan or Four Seasons, which tend to be more budgeted. You can grow the tea more in bulk, but don't have the same sort of high mountainy stuff that
richness
we're getting
and
from
flavor.
here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's interesting about high mountain tea is that because of the scarce resources, the higher up you go in elevation, the harder the tea leaves themselves have to work to grow, the slower they grow, and as a result, the more flavor that they do develop. So while it's nice to be like, ooh, high mountain tea, there really is a distinct difference in the way that the plant grows, the way that the acidity of the soil happens, the terroir, all of these things.
Yep.
So
yeah, and right when I learned about high mountain tea, which was very on in my tea journey, I was just kind of throwing around the term very synonymously with like Taiwanese Oolong, which I've since learned is it can be very, very inaccurate, as there are some very nice lower elevation Taiwanese Oolongs, but high mountain tea in particular is very, very distinct.
So this is quite nice. This is when do you think that you'd be drinking this, James?
Ooh. Honestly, I can drink high mountain tea any time of day. I love it. But I guess for me, this would be kind of like a mid-afternoon tea. For me, nice high mountain teas is just very, very well balanced. It's not too cooling, not too warming like some of the ripe pu'ers can be.
Right.
I don't know. I love high mountain tea.
Yeah, I like this kind of tea maybe a couple hours after waking up. I'm actually going to taste the tea a lot better than to kind of my senses awake, a little bit hungry. It helps with that. Yeah, I like it by itself. I wouldn't really pair this with food. It's light enough that I think it would maybe lose some of its intensity and some of the flavor and taste notes if you had it with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Teas that I might have more with food tend to be more of the roasted oolong types, like the dong ding that we've had before, and maybe some of those wooey oolongs that have just such a bold flavor that just contrasts really nicely with the food. And how did you steep this for steep number 2?
So I did pretty much the same amount of time.
30 seconds?
30 seconds. In similar in terms of the saturation of color here, very similar. So this will teeter off, and if you don't reheat your water, you'll need to definitely expand the amount of time you're brewing this for. And as a result, usually when I'm drinking tea, I'm doing it far more casually and a little bit of a longer-winded experience. So I'll have a cup, I'll read a little bit, I'll brew another cup, I'll read a little bit, whatever it is, whatever my ritual might be that day. As a result, the water will cool down. So I'd say after your second steeping, I would encourage you to definitely either reboil your water or give it a much longer time. For the gongfu style of brewing, I would rather have somebody, at least in my experience, reboil water and keep it relatively similar amount of time as opposed to try to play with the time too much.
And it kind of depends also like how many people you're drinking with, how fast you are steeping. Because if you are steeping this, like let's say you're drinking this small little gaiwan with like 4 people and you're just kind of chatting over tea, so people are drinking pretty quickly, then you probably don't need to reheat your water. And you shouldn't. Reheating your water is bad if you can avoid it.
Right. The reason being that you're going to lose a little bit of the oxygen from the boiling process.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, this has been really tasty. It's nice, light.
I would say this steep is a little bit different, actually. I'd say it's still very well balanced, but I'm getting more floral notes.
I can see that. Yeah, definitely. I'm actually, the less of the vegetal. Interestingly, and this is going to sound really weird, but there's almost like a little bit of this is going to sound really weird, but bitterness from broccoli taste that I'm getting out of.
You make me want to taste it.
I don't know. That's what this strikes me as.
It definitely does have kind of that bitterness, and I feel like with that bitterness, we're getting a little bit more body than the first one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably a product of the leaves opening as well.
Yeah, so you can steep this, I mean, given the amount of leaf that we have in here, a handful of times after this for sure. Extend the amount of time and really enjoy this tea. It's quite lovely.
Yeah, and you've been drinking this tea for a little bit now.
Yeah, this is kind of a regular purchase for me.
Okay.
So we got this from Floating Leaves.
Yep.
And this is probably the highest or the best Alishan that I've had was from Floating Leaves. So compared to some of the other places, I would say recommend them first.
Yeah, I would totally recommend Floating Leaves as well. If you're in Seattle, go check them out in Ballard. Otherwise, they have a great online store as well. Showin is fantastic, and you can email her any questions. So
this has been episode 18. Doing an Alishan. What do we got next?
We are reviewing another high mountain tea from Floating Leaves. It's called Huanshan, which, unlike Alishan, is a mountain that I've never heard of.
Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in, and check us out at tdb.org for more information.